Ahoy there, Chris. Good to see you. Sorry, a slight delay getting back to you, but yes. Anyway, your golf. I think there's a good chance there'll be more questions than answers, Chris, after this little review. But one will do one's best to assist you in bringing some clarity, which is the number one plan. Some clarity to proceedings. A driver. Decent setup will slow you down a little bit, I think. Getting a bit hasty there. I think, by and large, you can see your target line there. Of course, where the camera's positioned, I think it's a nice position for the camera, sort of looking down through between the target line and your body alignment there, whoopsie, and your body alignment. There we go. We can see your feet, knees, hips, shoulders pointing a little bit to the left. So just watch that. I'll send a corresponding little drill, little exercise you can do to get that upper body aligned a little bit more. You can see sort of your left arm appearing from our view. If you can see your left knee and a bit of your left hip there emerging, you'd expect to see a bit of your left elbow joint, just to sort of make sure everything's starting at 0 degrees sideways to the target. Posture's good, as ever, always looking pretty sporty. Centre of gravity sort of vertically above the middle of your feet, or just probably slightly towards your toes, which is fine. All good. Arms hanging down from your shoulders. Other than that, so yeah, only that little bit of misalignment. The upper body pointing a little bit to the left. Let's just pinch you in a little bit here. There we go. Alrighty. We'll take you through a few sort of key positions in the swing. I think by the time the club gets halfway back, the left arm and shaft pointing a lot more towards the target, towards us, should I say, or parallel with the target line. You see the shadow that your club is casting down there. The shaft running parallel with body alignment and target line. That's really, really good. Toe of the club pointing towards the sky. Again, pretty stable. Only thing I would say is the way you achieve that. There's quite a lot of forearm rotation, so your forearms end up being quite level at this point. You can see your elbow joint, there's some flexion in your elbow where it's going that way, but I'm going to talk to the camera. Excuse my frog in my throat this morning. I'm going to talk to the camera face on, or sort of when I can see my own reflection, as it were, and it'll allow me just to convey excuse me, a little bit more about how the forearms work in the backswing. But it's not chronic. I certainly wouldn't panic about it. Let's just press on from here. And by the time we finish the backswing, left arm fully extended. Mass of the club, I keep pressing the wrong button there. Mass of the club balanced above the ankles. Good to see. Some flexion remaining in the right knee. That's what we've asked for. And the gap between the forearms fairly consistent. So one of the reasons I would say that sort of quite a lot of forearm rotation in the early part of the backswing isn't such a problem. We can see, let's just change the colour of that line so it sticks out a little bit more. The angle of the back of your left arm, you kind of always want to see the club face on a similar angle to the back of the left arm. It's a little bit what the industry would call closed, which, maybe doesn't pose a monster problem, especially if you've got to pay hate for losing your shots off to the right. Then that club face being a little bit closed at that point is probably a good thing. We'll chug on forwards. Let's just set you up for the forward swing. Transitioning quite nicely, but I have to say, when we reach the sort of region of impact here, right, don't worry too much about the club face pointing out to the right. That's a deflection caused, and that's distortion of the truth. The club was pointing towards the target or thereabouts, I'm sure, at impact, but it will basically cause the club. You'll see another frame later and the club's profoundly closed. So it looks like it's pointing off to the right here and then the left there. Obviously, it's already done the damage. It's already hit the ball at this point, but it just shows you the forces that are exerted upon the golf club are quite extraordinary. I'm always amazed that the golf club head even stays attached to the shaft. But decent. We can see some left leg. We can see some left glute here. We can see some flexion remaining in the right arm. So overall decent. Really good job moving in the right direction. Excuse the pun very much. But I would just probably highlight this. I would just say that the encouragement I've given you historically, whoopsie, I'm going to have to shrink you down a little bit. Make you a little bit smaller. There we go. And the encouragement that I've given you in the past to make a little bit more of an in to out swing. I'll show you what I mean by that. That line is going right through the middle of your upper sternum, your centre of mass, your centre of gravity there. And this is a sort of perfect idea of a swing, sideways onto the target, and the club would move backwards and forwards, almost like a sort of a toy car on a loop the loop sort of thing. So the club goes a little bit under that. Again, I'll explain why that's happening in a second to the camera, or in a second in your time. It'll be a few moments in my time. And when we change direction, the club travels from a little bit above that line, little bit from above, and exits a little bit underneath. It's not crazy. All right, now you can see your left elbow sticking out behind, sort of pointing out behind you, is helping to keep the face open more than you might like. But if the club is travelling sort of from the outside to the inside, it's travelling from above this yellow line to under that yellow line, as you can see it is. To make the ball fly straight, you'll have learned to keep the face open to negate the chances of hitting a pull or a pull hook, which will be quite destructive as well. So it's a little workaround, but we'll discuss it in a second. And there are two things that have to sort of combine: a more into-out path and a more kind of even and continuous rotation of the club face, club head itself in the forward swing. And we'll talk about that in just a second when I get in front of the camera. For now, we've got 7 swings here to get through. I would suggest probably we pick one or two, one from front and one from down the line. You can talk to me about what the ball did that you perhaps didn't like and why that might be. And we can kind of condense it a little bit. Because if we've got so many different swings, your swings are kind of unique, like a fingerprint. We're a little bit more behind you with the camera angle, but you can see that trend again. The forearm's getting quite flat and the shaft of the club starting to point a little bit behind you. Again, not chronic, but just something worthwhile touching on when I get in front of the camera. Other than that, I think you're doing really well. Not too much straightness in the right leg, just a little bit of softness there. Gap between the forearms staying consistent. So it's easy to forget when we watch these swings just how much you've done. But you see that little change, that little cycling of the club going forwards and outwards above the target line and then kind of exiting underneath and going to the left side. A little bit of over the top will tend to allow you to hit pull shots straight left, slice shots that start left and curve to the right, or even shots that start left and curve further left. So you get the same trends. So we're not really learning anything radically different from that swing. We'll go to the next one. All right, and again, you can see that trend in the club. So consistency in these swings, but just one or two little tiny upticks, upgrades that we might like to do. All right, but yeah, a little bit less rotated through that one, I have to say. Probably not your finest hour in terms of rotating. You see the body sort of stretching upwards as you go through rather than continuously rotating, and just kind of throwing the club at the ball a little bit with the hands. So yeah, I mean, it's not terrible. Again, you're not learning anything radically different from that swing than we have from the other ones. This is a much nicer angle, credit where it's due. So what we'll do is we'll put a nice idea of the swing plane on, because I think it's a very fair representation of a sideways on swing. Again, still upper body alignment slightly open, so I must remind myself to give you notes on improving that. Then through the backswing, so you can see the shaft starts to point a little urgently behind you, but a great job with the left arm pointing back towards the camera. But yeah, just quite a lot of forearm rotation at that point of the swing. So that's definitely a point of order. Club gets above that line and attacks the ball from above that line onto that line, exits underneath, and then you're doing really well to try to hold it on line, but it's hard work. And you can see your body having a hard time of keeping the club on line. You've done a great job there to get that, to make the best of it, but I think we can make it slightly easier than that. All right, so there's that one. Now on to some front-on stuff. And I think very, very obviously, you can compare to any stock footage of somebody playing from front on. You can see how far back in your stance the ball is, which is really not ideal for a metal wood shot. I think I touched on this in a little note to you on our text messages. But you can see the shaft of your golf club leaning profoundly forwards. You really don't want to, you certainly wouldn't want those kinds of conditions at impact. It will work possibly okay for a lofted fairway wood or a 7 wood if you carry one, something like that, but it just will mean your 3 wood and your driver are almost unhittable. You won't get it airborne. It will be a real struggle, and if you do, you'll have to do some contortions, some acrobatics to get that done. So yeah, starting position here is really limiting. You can see your head trying to get back behind that line and stay back behind that line, doing a decent job to get the club on the ball, but just making life a little bit hard to get the proper launch. You can see the way the left elbow collapses out behind you a little bit, which is a work around that. And the club is not free to travel quite as fast as you'd like it to. But again, I'll explain that to camera. All right, but front on, the early release of the club there, you can see the way the club is sort of unloading into impact. Again, not terrible, but it's just brought about by having the ball position too far back, so that's not ideal. Another front on. Again, because it's a shorter shafted club, it's a hybrid club, this one, I would still say that ball position is too far back, which isn't great. And the shaft leaning forwards, which isn't necessary. You can lean it a bit forwards when you've got enough loft on the club, but we don't really need to lean the shaft forwards. Sort of leaning your body into your left side a little bit, great for chipping and pitching, but not so important for your hybrid stuff. Again, in the main, decent. But that left elbow following, and that's rather cool, isn't it? Luke Donald texting me as I'm talking to you. There we go. Not sure what that message was all about. I think he adopted a donkey. They gave him a donkey when he was in Austria as a cultural sign of appreciation. Called it Ryder. Amusing. Right then. Nice here. Now, the difference here really, Chris, is that the forward lean of the shaft is appropriate. A central ball position and the forward lean of an iron club, because it's got a forward lean by design and plenty of loft, you can lean the shaft forwards much more happily and it will actually work. So sort of stick with that trend with your iron swings, play the ball more centrally, and certainly your mid irons and your short irons, absolutely. You can afford even to lean into the strike a little bit more as well, because you've got plenty of loft there. But that's nice and graceful and balanced and elegant and rhythmic. Decent in the majority of ways, but I'm going to pick on your upper body alignment. The fact that we need to get the club moving a little bit more underneath the plane through impact, and then we can release the club properly and get a little bit more continuity and effectiveness and functionality from your swing. So I'll crack on explaining that in front of the camera now. Okay, Chris, sun's out. Weather's actually half reasonable in England, but looks much nicer where you are. Could see you breaking a sweat out there. Yeah, plenty going on, so keep up the good work. Liking the work that you've done so far, must put that on record. I think tidier, and certainly you can expect things to pay dividends in due course, with your swing being a little bit more orthodox, perhaps you might call it, a bit more repeatable, a bit more doable. We're in the same boat, always a work in progress. So yeah, quickly rattle through probably those three major points. First being your setup. When you set up, sometimes your upper body starts to point a little bit to the left. That's quite common because we've got arms the same length and we play a game where the right hand is lower than the left on the handle, and as such the right arm can get a little bit straight and we can see your left arm appearing a little bit underneath from our perspective. From your point of view from the camera, we can see your left arm appearing somewhat this way. If it appeared somewhat that way, that would be significant of an upper body which is probably better set to deliver the club through the space the ball is in, from the inside of this line to the outside of that line. Okay, we'll come back to that in just a second, but for now I'll send you a separate video which deals very thoroughly with that sideways on appearance and that down the line body alignment, upper body alignment specifically. I think your lower body alignment sets up to the target entirely consistently every time, but that upper body maybe just sets things in terms of the upper body this way, so the club naturally, if it was down or up to the upper sternum, the upper part of your body which provides the bulk of the rotation and the center of mass, which is where your power chiefly comes from, if it's pointing a little this way, and as a result the club will want to wander out in that direction, to get it back onto a more orthodox line, then we're making life hard for ourselves, and we're certainly making it hard for ourselves to get our body into a condition where we're delivering the club on a more desirable sort of in to square to in path as the club arcs through impact. From this way to that way is quite desirable because it produces some of the more potent, more powerful ball flights. So as we are thinking about your upper body alignment, ideally there'd be a bit of softness in that right elbow, a little bit of softness in that right shoulder, and your upper body would align parallel. When you take the club back, you're after a feeling that feels perhaps more like the club is wide and away from you and your arms are sort of long. So you can see a gap there that you can see through my forearms to the back fence. We don't really want this way. Okay, so again, if your right elbow suddenly pops out behind you like that, sideways, you do a decent job to recover it and get into a decent position at the end of your backswing. I'm not saying it's all for the birds, but really, really decent. So elbow goes a little this way, but then you're in good company. Jack Nicklaus and Rory McIlroy have been guilty of that in the past. So, you know, it does not have to be something that's too categorically bad. But in a perfect world, it would be more orthodox and the club would go more directly back and everything would be simplified. But you can see from this angle as well, my right arm is above my left, so to speak. It's not level, like you could rest a tray on it here. So again, if that right elbow didn't fold at all, you'd need to find a way to soften it to allow you to complete your backswing. If it didn't fold at all, you'd struggle to complete your backswing at all. So the optimum idea from front on is left side tall, right side curved, and then nice and wide backswing, and that'll keep a rate of rotation in your forearms, which is kind of really easy to repeat and really dependable. So again, a separate video available that I'll send you a link to on that. Now, when it comes to arriving at the end of your backswing, we can see that imaginary plane line, which I can't draw on the screen right now because of limitations of tech, but we see the club go almost immediately that way. Now, the way I would have you think about this, Chris, is that if you stand at your full height with vertical spine, which is very everyday, and we have the head of the club about level with your sternum, if I take that club on a journey around me, okay, it stays level with the ground, or certainly it can stay level with the ground. The first move I would make forwards would not be above that line. It wouldn't be this way, okay? The mass of the club, if you softened your hold and just let this club, the mass of the club, fall to the ground, it would externally rotate your right forearm. And that you'll recognise from setting up for a skippy stone across a pond, which is, you know, very much the universal source of power that we want to tap into. So the body opens up as we start forwards, so that way, and the right arm rotates externally that way. So things go in the opposite direction almost. So this way, we don't really want the body opening up and this part of your right arm going that way. Okay, so that gets over the top. And that has other considerations as well. But this, all right, where the mass of the club just falls down behind you is the way it's going to feel. Disconcerting at first, that external forearm rotation this way, so that, all right, that can feel very disconcerting if you're worried about hitting a shot off to the right, because it needs to be combined with a very deliberate squaring of the club to the target and a very deliberate, you know, rotation of the club in the forearm, in the forward swing. So this way needs you to work hard to square the club out. It's quite disconcerting at first if you're not used to it. If you go this way, what will happen, as we see in your videos, we go above that line, that imaginary plane line, we go above it, and the club comes back down to the ball, which it must, and then it exits left. And what happens is you'll see your elbow pop out sideways like this. All right, and the reason for that is because if your club is traveling that way, then you'll need to open it, so in a sense reverse rotate your club, which slows it down. It leads to very unsatisfactory strikes, but it does have a habit of kind of working with the swing path to stop the ball going left and further left or straight left. If your club is traveling this way, why would you want the club face pointing in that direction? Why would you want to make an effort to square the club to that path? If you had a swing path which was more neutral, more down the line, or possibly even more right to left, then you can work hard turning the club face over or squaring the club face. You might get a few pushes at first, which is absolutely fine. But then when you learn to roll the club face over and you keep that forearm, that lead arm, continually and evenly rotating, this elbow will appear to hide. You can see it doesn't pop out until perhaps much later in the swing, and it will fold underneath. So again, another video link that I'll add that deals with this more thoroughly, but that sort of front on image of you kind of like this, with that elbow almost sort of chicken winging out sideways, that looks a little bit awkward, is because the initial part of your swing, the path of your swing, is over the top, and that will tend to combine with a chicken wing to get the ball roughly to fly straight. Because if you open the face, so this way opening, so opening the face, if the club's going left, the face will need to point right of that to bring the ball back to the target, or stabilize the ball flight and have it fly vaguely in the right direction, because they contribute about 85%, 15%. The club face is the big player, and then the swing path is the secondary player. But again, they interact with each other, and if you swung this way, you're going to make it playable by closing the face, something akin, if you've had any tennis experience or any table tennis experience or any paddle experience, where you're trying to create a sort of topspin forehand. So this way, that's a great one to practice and mess around with. Or if you were a left-handed person playing right-handedly, with your lead hand, your left hand, your favorite hand, if you're a left-handed person playing right-handed, then that rotation, that constant and even rotation of the club to keep it constantly turning over, would basically assist you in a shot shape which starts the ball out to the right and curves it back to the target, which is the most powerful shot shape. All right, so in short, we're sideways on, our upper body aligns, we want our forearms and our shoulders to align parallel with our feet. Nice wide backswing, so we don't want this elbow popping out behind you and then having to sort of lift it up to the top. We don't want the club starting this way to begin with. We want the initial direction of the club to be that way, so like it's falling down. Just feel the mass of it, soften your hold pressure, and just feel the club falls to the ground. And then from there, you've got a job to do, because we've got to get to catch up to impact. So again, the club feels like it falls down behind me, and then I impact with the club on my right. And that's what's going to give me a lot of potency in terms of power. It's also going to give me an interesting ball flight, which of course you can report back to me about. But if you get a few hook shots, a few slice shots early on, that goes with the territory. Sideways on, nice and wide, in here, from this direction, from a low position, feeling like the club's behind you, pushing out to a high position. And we want to keep that lead arm rotating, rotating, rotating. And it can flare out at the end, but what we don't really want is over the top initially, across, and then the elbow buckling out this way to try to stop the face from pull hooking it off to the left, which of course is going to be destructive. So that should just about make sense, I hope. But there's 3 things that you can work on over the next month. I wouldn't chase all 3 rabbits at once. I would chase one at a time and just work on one at a time, work on some feelings independently of each other, and see if you can start blending them together, which of course is the art of it, and that's what all we human beings are doing. Your golf swing's got about 1,000 moving parts in it. Probably best you forget I said that, but you know, blending those all together and turning it into your signature golf swing is really what the challenge is all about. Some do it better than others, of course. All right, but yeah, that should do for now. Those are the 3 things: your upper body alignment initially, initial direction of the club, the external rotation, that club falling down, shallowing, some people call it, behind you from in to out, and then the club face, the club head constantly evenly forward rotating will give you a nice aesthetic to your swing and potentially some more of the stuff that you are after. Okay, my dear chap, keep up the good work. I'll see you in a roundabout way in about a month. Bye-bye.